Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to this evening's telephone town hall with Congresswoman Emily Randall, your representative for the 6th District of Washington. My name is Robin, and I'll be moderating the conversation this evening. This is an interactive forum, which means we're looking forward to hearing from you this evening. During the call, we'll be taking as many questions as we possibly can from constituents like you. And to make sure we're able to hear from as many people as possible, we do ask that you keep your questions brief and to the point. So this evening, if you would like to ask Congresswoman Randall a question, we invite you to press *3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. You may also sign up for the Congresswoman's e-newsletter by pressing *6 at any time during the call, or if you prefer, subscribe online at randall.house.gov. Again, please press *3 now to ask Congresswoman Emily Randall a question, or if you'd like to subscribe to her e-newsletter to stay in touch with her and understand what she's working on, press *6. If you happen to be streaming the event this evening, you can submit your question by typing your name and your question below the streaming player. And again, we realize we likely won't get to every question this evening, so if you don't get a chance to ask your question during tonight's call, please note you'll be able to leave a voicemail for the Congresswoman and her staff at the end of the call simply by remaining on the line. Again, please press *3 now to ask a question, *6 to subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter. And with that, I'd like to turn the call over to Congresswoman Emily Randall. Congresswoman, you are live and the floor is yours, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in and joining us this evening. This is our 17th town hall this year. We've done a combination of in-person, and this is our third virtual or teletown hall. We did another text-in live town hall. Being engaged and accessible to constituents like you is so important to me. And it has really informed my work over these last almost 12 months in Congress. And I know it's been hard. It's been a really hard year for all of us. It's been challenging as a freshman member to figure out how to do this job, to do it in the minority, and to do it in a way that really centers the impact on neighbors like you, especially when the attacks on our communities just keep coming. But the time I get to spend with all of you, whether here online or in high school gyms around the state, in meetings and coffee shops and in tours of businesses, is really, really inspiring to me. And I'm just grateful that all of you stay so engaged. The last time we were on a call, we were in the middle of the longest government shutdown in history. And, Speaker Mike Johnson shut down the House for 7 weeks. Even though the Senate during the shutdown was doing some regular business work, confirmations, Mike Johnson refused to call us back into session, refused to allow us space to try and find a path forward to get things done. But my Democratic colleagues and I kept showing up here in DC. I was here 5 of the 7 weeks to advocate for you, to be available, to find, a path forward. And then we kept working hard in the district. We've been trying to ensure that your taxpayer dollars are returned to our communities, that we are spending, funding in a way that uplifts regular people. And for those of you who don't know, we do a lot of casework, which is help with government agencies. And our 3-person casework team has completed around 300 casework requests this year and returned over $4 million to constituents in the district, whether that's VA benefits, disability, survivors benefits, Social Security, IRS, Department of Commerce grants, we are working hard to deliver results for you. We've also submitted 15 community project fund requests in the draft House funding bills. That the cap is 15 per member, and not everyone is able to get all of their projects approved in the draft legislation, but our staff worked really hard to make sure that every project they submitted was supported by community and also fit in the boundaries of the appropriations process. That totals, if all 15 CPFs are funded, 18 million across all 6 counties in the district. We've been working hard to send letters to the administration when they cut or claw back funding for congressionally appropriated projects, like when FEMA funds were frozen for the tsunami tower. We wrote to Secretary Noem and were able to get those funds unfrozen. We weren't successful with the levy funding for Aberdeen and Hoquiam, but we are going to continue working hard. And in addition to this work that we're doing in community, I serve on 2 committees, Natural Resources and the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. And as a member of these committees, I keep working hard to bring your voices with me to ensure that in every piece of legislation, I'm centering the impact on neighbors like you to deliver wins for folks all across the 6th. And just this past week, I had the opportunity to do what's called lead floor debate. I was the Democratic representative for every bill out of natural resources and oversight on the floor, the non-controversial bills. We call it the consent calendar. And we're delivering, or suspension calendar, consents the legislature. We were able to really highlight the impact on communities, and I was able to pass 3 bills, 2 out of natural resources and 1 as an amendment to the NDAA. The trust land transfers out of natural resources were to return land to the Quinault Indian Nation and the Lower Elwha Qualam tribe, and the NDAA amendment that we had drafted as an original bill was to provide supports to families who were having a permanent change of duty station, like so many folks who find themselves stationed at Naval Base Kitsap. It builds on work that I did in the legislature, and I'm really proud of how hard my team worked to help deliver these results. I'm really proud of the ways that we were able to engage Republican colleagues to make sure that these bills got priority, and we'll keep fighting to ensure that they move forward in the Senate so that we can celebrate success before the end of this Congress. I know that you, my neighbors, are concerned about a number of issues, so I want to stop with the background and make time to answer as many of your questions as possible. And just a reminder, you can press *3 to ask a question and *6 to subscribe to our newsletter.
Are you ready to take your first question, Congresswoman?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're going to go with Kyle from Bremerton. Kyle, you are live with Congresswoman Emily Randall. Please go ahead, Kyle.
Hi, Ms. Randall. I was wondering what it is we are doing to go across the aisle to the Republicans and disprove a lot of the rhetoric that they come out with in front of them to try to open their eyes.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Kyle. And, as I think a lot about what's the most compelling way to move my colleagues. And I've used this example in in-person town halls before, so you may have heard it. But I think a lot about, if you are in relationship with someone and you are in a disagreement, whether it's a spouse or a family member or a close friend, and you tell them that they're wrong. I don't find that often changes the mind of the person that I'm arguing with. So, there are definitely times in committee that we are providing actual facts in contrast to the rhetoric that the Republicans are using. And to me, that is more for people watching to understand what the truth is. The work that I do to try and bring Republican colleagues along is much more relational. I try to ask them about their kids and their inspiration for their work, and they meet my dog, and we get to know each other on a human level, and that has opened up doors for me to have deeper conversations about real impacts in our community. And it's not the approach everyone takes, but it, I think, is one that has really worked for me to treat each other as, for the most part, I can't always do it to all of my colleagues, but as humans worthy of respect, to listen, to be curious and learn. And and we stand true on our values. I don't compromise on policy and truth that is essential to my my values as a Democrat, a progressive, as a Washingtonian. But I do try to lean in with curiosity to move folks along. And it's we'll see. We made some progress. We passed some bills. We're, I think, moving the public too, and we will keep it up for the next year and longer until we have leadership across all levels of government that really reflect our neighbors' needs. But thanks so much for that question, Kyle.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from John, also of Bremerton. John, you are live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead, John.
Yes, I had two questions. One is if we could get an update on what the status of discussions around extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies that were at the heart of the shutdown earlier this year. And the second is if there's any update on the Epstein Transparency Act and the timeline for full compliance with that legislation from Congress.
Yeah, thanks so much for those questions, John. There are multiple efforts from Democrats and moderates to introduce what we call discharge petitions to extend those Affordable Care Act tax credits. A discharge petition, as you may remember from the Epstein files transparency legislation, is a way that we can circumvent the typical committee process where you get 218 signatures, which has to include Republicans, that triggers a bill to come to the floor for debate and vote. And so, there's a discharge petition introduced by Democratic leadership that has 214 signatures currently, waiting for 4 brave Republicans to join us to ensure that we are able to get a vote on the Affordable Care Act tax extensions, just like Republicans made sure to have a vote on the making tax breaks for billionaires and big businesses permanent in July. Regular people deserve us to stick up for them too. But what the Republicans have instead introduced is a healthcare bill that isn't much to write home about. Recycled old Republican ideas that have never been successful in the past. Some non-problematic policy about PBM transparency, but no extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and no real way to lower costs for families and individuals trying to afford healthcare. What is likely to happen is there will be a vote on that Republican policy and potentially a vote on an amendment that some moderate Republicans are introducing to try and add the tax credit extension into this bill. It's unclear whether or not that amendment will pass. And there are some rumors that if the amendment doesn't pass, some of those moderates will join the discharge petition that the Democrats have introduced to trigger a vote on the ACA tax credits. We're working hard. We're pushing. We're using every tool we have. And it is just maddening as someone who has spent my entire career working on healthcare, both in the legislature and before, to have people just be so willfully dismissive of the real impact on people, not just in blue districts like ours, but Republican represented districts around the country. The other question about the Epstein files is a good one too. So the bill that I think you're talking about, the Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie bipartisan bill to require transparency and a release of the Epstein files. It has some loopholes, which are that if the Trump administration and the Justice Department initiate a new investigation, some of the documents can be withheld. What doesn't have those loopholes is a subpoena that Summerlee introduced in the Government Oversight Committee to require the Justice Department and the Epstein estate to comply and make their files public. We on the Oversight Committee have been getting a steady stream of documents from the Epstein estate, though the Justice Department has not complied with additional document release except for those that have already been made public. Over this last week, we got a production of a number of really sensitive photos from the Epstein estate. The committee has released some of them as an example, but there are more that are really disturbing photographs. We also have active committee subpoenas for bank documents from Epstein, and the Republicans added to the subpoena Hillary and Bill Clinton, who have not come to testify yet, but we expect to, or we know that the Republicans will be pushing for over the next few weeks into the new year. What I will say is that I don't think it matters what partisan ideology you have. If you were involved in or have knowledge of the trafficking and abuse of women and girls that was coordinated by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, you deserve to be held accountable. And it's disturbing work that we are doing as a committee, but we will continue to push for transparency and accountability for the survivors and for the perpetrators. Ready for the next
Thank you,
question.
Congresswoman. Yes, ma'am. Folks, if you're joining the call a little bit late, you'd like to ask a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad if you'd like to ask a question, and *6 at any time during the call if you would like to subscribe to Congresswoman Randall's e-newsletter. So, Congresswoman, our next call is from Ron of Union. Ron, you are live on the call with Congresswoman Emily Randall. Please go ahead, Ron.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to know what Congress is doing about the children that are being taken by ICE from their parents. I mean, this is what Russia does to Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. So much of what this administration is doing under Secretary Noem, under President Trump, under the Department of Homeland Security and ICE is disgusting and enraging and heartbreaking. And, as a representative who represents Tacoma, which includes the ICE Northwest Detention Center and processing facility, I've been showing up to ensure that ICE and the GEO Group, the private prison company that manages it, know that we are watching, know that we are keeping track, know that we are going to ask tough questions, and know that we are invested in the human beings that are being held and deported. I have told the story before. I met with a longtime green card holder in the Tacoma detention facility who was detained entering SeaTac from his anniversary trip to the Philippines. I've met with moms and elders who are sick and have serious healthcare needs. And the last time I was able to go into the detention facility in Tacoma, we learned that, folks are able to do laundry once a week, but your clothing rations only include 3 or 4 pairs of underwear. And so I asked every staff member who was there giving us the tour how many times a week they change their underwear. Human beings deserve to be treated like human beings. And, when Trump was campaigning, he promised to round up the worst of the worst criminals. But what we are seeing is that moms and teachers and parents and grandparents and our neighbors are being rounded up and treated as less than human. And add to that family separation, deportation to non-countries of origin, people getting deported to countries that they have never been to where they don't speak the language, is not how we keep our country safe. We have launched oversight investigation on the oversight committee. We've also launched a new tracking tool to track and record complaints of, mistreatment. I introduced a policy bill after Customs and Border Patrol participated in a raid at the active fire, the Bear Gulch fire, where they detained 2 individuals from a fire crew. We are going to keep pushing. We are going to keep holding Secretary Noem accountable. We are going to keep holding the Trump administration accountable, and we will continue to ensure that we do everything we can so that everyone in Washington state is treated with dignity and as real human beings.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next call is Carol, also from Bremerton. Hi, Carol. You're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Carol.
This is Carol Branscombe, and I've been a longtime resident of Washington, but I cannot tolerate the fact that Trump is bringing down the nation and everything is blocked by him having strategic people in this place or that place or the other. Is there any way that we, the people, can start a petition to get Trump impeached that forces a vote?
We have been talking about impeachment this last week. For the second time, Al Green has introduced articles of impeachment that were in which a motion to table, which is a privilege motion. It means we get to the vote is to set aside the impeachment resolution without being debated, without being voted on. And because Republicans have the majority, the motion to table is successful. I have always voted not to table because I believe that an impeachment resolution deserves to be debated. But some caveats that I will share that more senior colleagues have raised, I think are important. If impeachment proceedings are initiated in a Republican majority in Congress, then it is Republicans who decide who the impeachment managers are. It is not Jamie Raskin from the Judiciary Committee and Robert Garcia that appoint impeachment managers. It is the Republican chairs of the Judiciary Committee and the Oversight Committee that will manage the proceedings. I think we still have to do everything we can to hold Donald Trump accountable, to shine a light on what he is doing. But I don't believe that impeachment proceedings run by Republicans in this majority will do anything that we want them to do. And I'll say, Trump has been impeached once before by the House and nothing happened. So yes, the people deserve a voice and deserve to stay engaged and deserve to advocate for the resolution that we all are owed: accountability by this president, leadership that is just and equitable and rooted in values. But I believe that I don't believe that impeachment proceedings under this Congress will get us there. So we have to use inside tools and outside tools. We have to, as Congress members, be working to, write oversight letters, to, get subpoenas like these Epstein file subpoenas introduced and passed. We have to ask tough questions of folks before the committee. We have to use our communications tools like this town hall and our social media to show people what's happening. But we also need neighbors like you to write op-eds, to talk to your neighbors, to ensure that folks who may not have felt engaged in politics before, may have thought that Trump wouldn't be that bad, may have doubted the importance of their participation in government. We need you to help us reach them. And I think I know that together, we can work towards a future that is better for all of us. But these next few years are going to be very tough.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next call is Ron from Port Orchard. Ron, you are live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead, Ron.
Thank you so much. Over the last 11 months, there appears to be a significant gap between the claims made by the former President Trump and many Republican leaders versus what's actually occurred in terms of policy outcomes, governance, and factual records. Yet much of the public discourse seems driven by repetitive of those claims rather than clear documentation compared to reality. So my question is really this: why are we, or why isn't Congress more actively and consistently using modern media such as television, social platforms, visual explainers, timelines, and direct messaging to clearly and plainly demonstrate these discrepancies to the public? It seems really to me that factual side-by-side communication, what was claimed versus what actually happened, could help voters better understand the record and make more informed decisions. Are we going to wait for the midterms? Are we going to wait for the next presidential election? What are we waiting for?
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. This is something I think about and my colleagues are talking about every day. We absolutely have to be better messengers. I have realized this year that that's one of the strongest tools that you have in the minority is telling the truth in public, loudly, and often. What also is true is that our media environment is fractured and fragmented in a way that it has never been before. No longer do the majority of the public get their news from the same handful of nightly news stations. I think it's something like 75% of people get their media from non-mainstream or legacy news sources, from social media, from like lifestyle podcasts. Non-political content, is where folks are getting the most of their information. And of that, the reality of that group of content creators that people are tuned into, more than 2/3 of them skew Republican. And that's because the right-wing private sector has been diligently invested in consolidation of media channels, in creating platforms that are right-wing leaning, in using new media tools in a way that is really powerful and compelling. My brother listened to Joe Rogan too. And, I think that we have a lot to do. I'll say that people aren't going to tune in and give the same credence to channels created by Democratic members of Congress. That's not an even one for one for these kind of platforms that we have to keep up with. But we as Democrats have been, instead of traditional press conferences, inviting content creators and influencers into the caucus room to do a series of interviews. The Democratic Women's Caucus has been working really closely with creators. Our office is reaching out to content creators to try and get on more of these platforms, and I try to have a pretty active social media presence. And we have to do more. So my request at town halls is always, if there are channels that you're tuned into, YouTubers, streamers, content creators that you think we should be engaged with, send them our way. And if you have friends or family who are trying to become content creators or influencers or have a podcast, and they, you know, tell you about it, like it, subscribe it, share it, offer to, be interviewed by them. I think we have to all be invested in building up this media ecosystem that will allow us to level the playing field. We also are able to use a certain portion of our annual budget on ads, on mailers, on TV and digital. And, we'll be spending, we've already spent some money from my office. We'll continue spending money to try and reach people. Know that we take it seriously. Know that we are working hard to combat the ICE commercials that the Trump administration is putting out there. But we're always open to your ideas and perspectives and suggestions.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Alec of Port Ludlow. Hi, Alec. You're live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for inviting us on here. I have a question about federal lands and protections for the environment. And so, given federal efforts to weaken policies such as the National Environmental Policy Act review process and to expand fossil fuel leasing on public lands, what specific steps are you taking to protect Washington forests, coastal areas, and wildlife habitat?
Yeah, thanks, Alec. We had my first committee markup where we reviewed a budget bill and added amendments or filed amendments that we voted on and then sent it out to the full Congress was in the Natural Resources Committee. And a surprise amendment, not just to Democrats, but a surprise to some of the Republicans in the committee, was a public lands sell-off scheme. And Jeff Hurd of Colorado is a fellow freshman. He's a Republican who I happen to like, and he was the only Republican to vote against that federal land sell-off scheme. All the Democrats did, and we continue to advocate for protections for our public lands. We do it in committee. We do it by filing bills. I have the Wild Olympics bill, a companion to Senator Murray's work to help protect more lands and rivers, wild space in Washington state. We have introduced the Equal Parks Act, which will help to reinstitute some Biden-era policy to create equal access to our parks, to ensure that our educational centers as a part of National Park Service, like the Bainbridge Island Japanese Exclusion Memorial, continue to operate, continue to tell the truth about what happened in lands across our country. And I'm a member of our Public Lands Caucus. I also went to Alaska with the American Lands Project, and I was just talking to some colleagues before this, Gabe Vasquez from New Mexico and Raul Ruiz from California, who've also been on Alaska trips, about the ways that we can work together to protect wildland and our natural resources, not just in Washington, but across the country. The Republicans are introducing really terrible bills to roll back Environmental Protections Act, Endangered Species Act, to allow reckless permitting reform that will just speed up fossil fuel extraction. And we are using every tool we can, including economic arguments about the negative impacts to tourism, other things that might be persuasive to Republicans, to try and push back. But I appreciate you caring and being invested in this work, and I hope you'll keep using your voice too, because the public protests around our national parks and the community stories have been really persuasive and are definitely part of how we can slow down some of these attacks to just extract everything possible from lands that we should be fighting to preserve.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And folks, just want to remind you there's still plenty of time to ask a question. If you would like to ask Congresswoman Randall a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now. And if you are, you're curious, you want to stay informed, you want to subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, you can press *6 to subscribe to her e-newsletter. If you're streaming online, simply type your name and your question below the streaming player. Next question, Congresswoman, comes from Corey of Bremerton. Corey, you are live on the call with Congresswoman Emily Randall. Please go ahead, Corey.
Thank you. Hi, Emily. This is Corey Kalk with Bremerton Food Line.
Hi, Corey.
I'm just wondering, do you have any concerns about SNAP funding in early 2026 and what's being done to ensure Washington supports feeding programs in our community?
Yeah, thank you, Corey. As you know, and we've talked about, SNAP has been under attack before the shutdown in, HR1, and certainly during the government shutdown, we've seen, gutting of program staff, just like so many agencies, and restrictions on funding, as well as rollbacks of other federal funding that help support food banks and hungry people. I think what we're going to see, what we know from HR1, the big ugly bill, is that at least 57,000 Washingtonians will be kicked off SNAP. And I've signed on to legislation to reverse those actions. While the bill to end the government shutdown included a full year of funding for SNAP, I'm really worried about, the ag bill as it's in development. I don't know that it will, we'll see an ag bill a farm bill this year because of so many of the provisions that would usually be in the farm bill were in HR1. But my Democratic colleagues on the Agriculture Committee are working really, really hard. And we've been collecting and sharing stories of impact on our neighbors and on impact on neighbors or Americans in Republican represented districts. Some of the things that I'm really worried about right now that I know you have seen up close have been immigrant families who used to be really comfortable coming to food banks, not feeling comfortable anymore because of the increased ICE activity and immigration rates. Thankfully, we're seeing some of our citizen neighbors check in on their immigrant neighbors, go to the food bank and deliver for them. Our community is resilient and invested in caring for one another, but we can't rely on private generosity alone. The government has an important role to play in ensuring that folks in the richest country in the world are not hungry, and we'll keep fighting alongside you to make sure that that is our reality in the future.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Miles of Gig Harbor. Miles, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Miles.
Yes, this is Miles Schneider. Hello.
Go right ahead, Miles. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yes, Congressman. I am a retiree right now from the Department of Corrections. I served over 30 years. The problem that I see is that Social Security is facing threats by this administration, and by, I think, 2033, Social Security will be cut back to like 80% or so. I'm also concerned about Medicare and what they're going to be doing to Medicare as well. I'm lucky. At least I have my pension and state pays for my medical treatment, but still, it's still very much at risk right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story and your truth, which is, those are concerns that I hear from so many of our neighbors and that my Democratic colleagues and I are really worried about. We have over 180,000 Social Security beneficiaries in Washington 6th. Folks like you who rely on Social Security to make ends meet and to retire in dignity. And, I think like we cannot afford to trust Republicans when they say they won't cut Social Security because they said the same thing about Medicaid and Medicare. And we have seen the impacts of those cuts already begin because of the dangerous policies in HR 1. I'm part of the Expand Social Security Caucus. We're working on pathways to sustainable funding to ensure that we can rely on Social Security long into the future. We'll see if there's any bipartisan support for action in the next year, but know that if Democrats have the gavels back in 2027, we will absolutely work on long-term solutions that will protect Social Security, not just for your lifetime, but for mine and for, folks even younger than me.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And folks, if you would like to stay in touch with the Congresswoman and you want to stay informed, please, I encourage you to subscribe to her newsletter. Press *6 on your telephone keypad to subscribe to the newsletter and stay in touch with the Congresswoman's working on. Congresswoman, we have Jennifer from Tacoma live on the line. Jennifer, you're live with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Representative Randall. Thank you so much for taking my call. The question that I have is a major concern about the military buildup that's been going on in the Gulf of Mexico. And then the latest thing where apparently the Dread Pirate Hegseth team has taken an oil tanker. Like, what is going on with that? Like, as far as I know, there hasn't been any sort of declaration of war. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen, for lifting this up and for being as horrified as I am. We know that Secretary Hegseth is a completely unserious and unqualified leader for our Department of Defense. We have seen the negative impact on our active duty military, on our national security, and on the respect that our allies have for the United States. This latest engagement in Venezuela is really scary and deeply problematic, unconstitutional. The orders to kill the survivors of, a bombing of a ship, like the confiscation of this oil tanker, it is unreal. What we know is that Trump is overstepping his role and stoking war for his own personal ends or for the ends of those who are his supporters and allies. The actions that Congress is taking, their colleagues of mine have introduced war powers resolutions that we'll see votes on next week, and I've co-sponsored 2 of them by Mr. Meeks and Mr. McGovern. We are going to continue conducting oversight investigations, and we're going to continue to push for the accountability that we deserve. I'll say the same thing about a potential impeachment of Hegseth as I said about an impeachment of Donald Trump. Well, I think the American people deserve it. Any impeachment proceedings in this Congress would be run by Republicans, and I don't trust that the Republican chairs of the Oversight Committee or the Judiciary Committee would carry that through successfully. So we are going to continue to use our communications tools. We are going to continue to use policy tools. We are going to continue to engage alongside neighbors like you to ensure that we push for safety. We push for following the Constitution. We push for respect for our enlisted and active duty military members who shouldn't be asked to carry out unconstitutional orders.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Joni. Joni, you're live with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Joni.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman Randall. I'm 5 years now liver transplant patient, and my husband has diabetes. And we have many medications and copays. After 2 years of adjusting insurance, I finally am at a place where we're okay with these copays, and now we're scared to death of all the talk of the increase in medical insurance. I'm a Medicare patient. What kinds of things are you and Congress doing in support of the healthcare issues of today? And is there hope for retired people like us?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. I think one of the most powerful tools that we have right now as Democratic members of Congress is to lift up the stories of neighbors like you. My office has hosted a series of like roundtable discussions and conversations with folks all around the district who are facing skyrocketing healthcare costs and decreasing access to healthcare in our communities. The $500 billion worth of cuts to Medicare via H.R. 1, triggered if Congress doesn't act to stop them, are terrifying and dangerous. The cuts to Medicaid that will strip so many Washingtonians of their coverage and remove that funding mechanism for hospitals and clinics in the district that are already struggling to stay open is dangerous, and we have to stop it. I've co-sponsored legislation to lower drug costs for American families, which will expand. It's called the Lowering Drug Costs for American Families Act, which would expand drug price negotiations program and repeal some of the changes in H.R. 1. Every opportunity I have to introduce an amendment to repeal the Medicaid cuts in H.R. 1, I take it. I think there is some interest in some bipartisan policy around pharmacy benefit managers, around cost transparency, and we're definitely going to push for that. But we also have to be building a path towards universal healthcare, towards a system that has less profit motivation, towards a future in which everyone has access to the healthcare that they need, when and where they need it, without the risk of going bankrupt or without having to decide which bills they're not going to pay to afford their healthcare. That's real for so many of our neighbors, and we deserve better.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question actually was submitted online. Gentleman's name is Trent, and Trent says, or asks, what is the status of the 9 appropriations bill that need to be passed by January 30th to avoid the next government shutdown?
Yeah. That's on my mind too, Trent. We're currently scheduled to be home in district the last week of January, right up against the funding deadline. And I'm really worried about the ability for us to find a deal to keep the government open to pass these appropriations bills when it seems the Republicans just want to be on vacation. So far, the House has not passed 7 of the remaining bills, and the Senate hasn't passed any of the 9. The 4 corners, which are Democratic and Republican leaders from both chambers, still haven't reached top-line funding level agreements, and things don't look good for a January 30th deadline. Not only have not 4 corners met, but it is unclear whether Republican leadership from the Senate and Republican leadership from the House are meeting. They're in chaos, and it's bad for the American people. We are going to continue fighting to advocate for passage of appropriations bills that will serve our neighbors. And there are some of these bills that I can't vote for because of toxic provisions in them, but we have been through the longest shutdown in our nation's history, and it hurt our neighbors. and they deserve us to take action before it's too late.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Larry of Belfair. Larry, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead, Larry.
Oh, Congresswoman. My name is Larry Rankin. I worked for the Bremerton Fire Department for 31 years. I retired, and then I became a disaster survivor specialist with FEMA, and I did that for 17 years. It's really not a question, but something that I hope you'll help the other Congress people in Washington, and that is to get an individual assistance declaration declared for the affected counties because of all the flooding. I know so many people do not have flood insurance, and their homeowner's insurance is not going to help them one bit.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important that Congress, the people from Washington, help all of the emergency managers in each of the affected counties meet the formula that's required to get approved for individual assistance. I know that public assistance has been approved by President Trump, which is great, but that doesn't help the individuals one bit. And I know so many people do not have flood insurance. And like I said, their homeowners isn't going to pay one penny. And so I just hope that you will assist the other people in the affected counties, because I know that there's going to be so many people without any assistance whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, it's not really a question.
Thank you, Larry, for your service, first of all, your long history of public service, and for using your experience to advocate for decisions that are better for our neighbors, especially in a time of emergency like we're facing right now. As you mentioned, the President approved the emergency declaration that Governor Ferguson sought. The governor needs to request major disaster declaration for individual assistance to become available. We are working closely with the state and with county leaderships to tally damages, which is needed before such a request can be made. And we'll absolutely advocate for a declaration when the governor requests it. I was on a letter with the rest of the delegation in support of the emergency declaration that was approved, and we will continue to advocate for the major disaster declaration. And, just as a reflection, early in my legislative career, there was a tornado in Port Orchard, and I have, doorbelled and talked to many neighbors who, face the same challenge. They weren't able to get the support that they needed to rebuild their lives. And that's what our neighbors deserve. They deserve the support to rebuild their lives. And we will work hard alongside, advocates and leaders like you, alongside our colleagues, alongside folks of any political stripes, to ensure that we are doing the best we can for people in Washington who are facing astronomical damage from these floods.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Ladies and gentlemen, we are nearly out of time. We have time for one more question. We do appreciate the opportunity to speak directly with you this evening and answer your questions. And remember, if we weren't able to get to your question this evening, you can contact us through our website at randall.house.gov or leave a voicemail after the event. Congresswoman, our last call comes from Lee, and Lee is from Port Orchard. Lee, You are live on the call with Congresswoman Emily Randall. Please go ahead, Lee.
Hi, Congresswoman. This is Lee Buxton. I'm one of the caregivers, and I just wanted to say I appreciate your hard work and everything that you're doing, and especially all the stuff you're having to go through. I can't imagine being you. And I think we all need to remember to thank you continuously and your team. And I think all you can do is the best you can do. And it sounds like you're doing a pretty darn good job of it when I hear what you have to say. So that's the main thing I wanted to say to you, and also to encourage people to donate to all your constituents to help get people elected. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. And it's my first time ever doing this. I was kind of shocked by this.
Oh,
So that's
well,
it for me.
you, Lee. Thank you for joining and, for raising your hand and for your kind words of encouragement. It's definitely a hard time to be a freshman Democratic member in the minority. But what gives me so much strength is neighbors like you, folks who really care about the people who live alongside us in community, who fight for their neighbors, who advocate for their neighbors, who often are, raising grassroots donations or bringing meals or doing what they can to ensure that their federal employee neighbors, their immigrant neighbors, the friends who are struggling to afford health care have what they need.
Thank you,
I can't
Thank
guarantee
you.
that it's going to better soon, but we are going to work hard every single day to make sure that we are putting the best interests of the people of Washington 6th and the people of this country at the forefront of decision making. And I'm really honored to represent you and so grateful for everyone who joined the call today. I know you could be doing a lot of things this evening, but your willingness to participate in our government, your willingness to advocate for the policies that you care about, your willingness to share your perspectives and your ideas, to ask tough questions and to learn how you can be even more involved is definitely what keeps me going. Like I often say, I go home as many weekends as I can, as often as I can, because being rooted in community, getting to see my neighbors at the grocery store and the coffee shop and on the sidewalk, getting to visit their businesses and to, see the work that they are doing for people and place is the best part of the job. There's some really, really tough parts, but I believe that as so much of our democracy and our systems and our safety net are crumbling, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to think carefully about how we rebuild. How do we rebuild a future that centers our needs, that centers real people, that puts our communities first? And that's what I am committed to do alongside you. So thanks for joining us tonight. Remember that you can press *6 to subscribe to our newsletter. You can visit randall.house.gov. You can reach out to our team for requests for casework, help, and support. You can send your comments on policy. We love to hear from you and look forward to the next chance we have to be on a virtual or in-person town hall. Thanks so much and have a good night.
Thank you, Congresswoman. A privilege and a pleasure to work with you this evening, ma'am. And folks, thank you so much for joining today's telephone town hall with Congresswoman Emily Randall. Please stay up to date on the Congresswoman's work. Follow her on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky at Rep. Emily Randall. And if you would like to subscribe to her e-newsletter, simply stay on the line and leave your name and email address after the tone. Thank you and have a blessed evening. Good night.